Good morning and welcome back to Gaming with ADHD. Today we are continuing our look at the Starfinder Galaxy Exploration Manual from Paizo Publishing. This is part 2 of my review, and I was originally just going to keep it to 2 parts, but there's so much good information here, I'm actually going to expand it into 3. The third part will be out next week, and that will talk about the planetary, for now I'm just calling it the planetary construction system because I don't remember exactly what they call it. But today we are going to take a look at the Sandbox Adventure setup. Now, if you didn't watch the first video, just a reminder about the book itself. It was released in 2021. If you're watching this when I released it, it's been out for about a month now. And it's 159 pages, and they charge $39.99 for the print version, or you can purchase it in PDF format directly from Paizo for $9.99, which that's what I did. The book contains rules for creating planets, exploring star systems, and their guidelines on how to set up a sandbox for gameplay instead of following a traditional narrative play. So, for the Sandbox Adventures, it's 22 pages of the book, and it's guidelines and toolboxes for creating the sandbox itself. The actual guidelines itself are not that long. Now I want to see. They're longer than the Galaxy Exploration setup, which was only 5 pages, and this is about 7 pages of guidelines and another 5 to 7 pages of different genres. And then the remainder is their toolbox, which is basically a variety of random generation tables. They broke the guide down into 5 different categories. The first was designing your setting, then designing a campaign to play in that setting, adventure and encounter design, the subgenres, and then the toolboxes. Now, like I said, it's less structured than the exploration system, and a lot of this is more guidelines than rules. It's suggestions, it's tips. If you've not created your own world, your own campaign setting, it basically walks you through how to get started. Now, it's not going to be a guide for mapping out everything within a campaign, but it's how a game master should get started with their campaign and then have the structure that they can build on later. So, for the setting design, the first tip that they give is to limit your scope. They don't suggest that you try to nail down every single detail right away. They also want you to just focus on what details do you need for the next session. If your players discovered a clue to an ancient artifact, plan for the artifact. Maybe you ended the session before they could start finding it, so you need to come up with your locations where the artifact is located, the NPCs that will guide them there, things like that. So don't try to plan out, the evil lord's hideout or all of the stuff if that's not relevant to that particular session. just focus on what you and the players are putting together. They also emphasize focusing on world building over story. When Paizo puts out their adventure paths, they're focusing on a narrative that they're going to guide you through for the next 6 months. Everything is going to be contained. You're going to be staying within a space station or on a planet, or even if you have travel through different areas, it's going to focus on a narrative. And so with this, they emphasize put more work into the world building and help the players build the narrative as you play the game, so that it's more episodic, more like episodes of Star Trek or something, where they show up at a planet, they do something, and then next week they do something else. So you can put in seeds for and a way to say end the campaign, or just keep playing adventure of the week. The other tip that they give is to use the book. Now, as I've been reading this, I've been looking at it for other campaigns or other game systems. I'm a big fan of Shadowrun. I have been looking at the Star Trek Adventures, and even the newly released Dune role-playing game. And I am finding just a wealth of information in this book. And so I think that's actually one of the best tips, is to use the book to help you flesh out those locations and those things that you're trying to build for your players. Okay. So the next thing, as they start, getting into it, is they say, okay, come up with a home base. Now, I am just highlighting over a lot of this. I realize it seems like I'm kind of giving all the information in the book, but I'm literally just giving you highlights. There's way more information than I'm going over, so I still absolutely recommend you get the book. With the home base, is it a giant starship, a colony, a space station? Where are your players going to be located? From there, expanding the setting. What is beyond the base? Can the players reach the locations, or do they have a starship that can get them there, or do they have to hitch a ride to get to the next location? Is that going to limit what kind of travel, what kind of things they can do? And with that being said, are there safe places for them when their travel is limited? They next say that you need to start adding in secrets, the relics that I was talking about, the secrets that with the NPCs, maybe the engineer working below decks is secretly head of the criminal underworld, but nobody knows it. Things that you can start to feed to your players for your adventures, basically the adventure hooks. And then the other big suggestion they recommend is to modify existing material. I absolutely agree with that. Brand new material is not always necessary. Sometimes, the Razor Cat, monster description is perfectly acceptable for a land shark of some kind. The specific stats aren't always as necessary, and sometimes just simple tweaks can help you through that. Or maybe you just use the exact same stats but call it something else. They also go into how to mix the two genres. Because Starfinder is based on the Pathfinder system, in fact, according to the description, they technically exist in the same universe, although the world of Pathfinder has been removed from the science fiction setting by the gods or something. They don't really specify, at least not that I've found yet. And so you still have the elves and the orcs and halflings, and so they talk about how to mix the settings. Do you want a harder science fiction, or do you want to add those fantastical elements to it? So they then get into designing your campaign. They talk about what kind of character groups work well in sandbox games. I just picked out a couple, like bounty hunters, mercenaries, archaeologists. These three, plus I think they have about 4 others, are automatically in a kind of situation where you don't have to stay in one place. There's reasons for your players to get out and explore. They're not trying to save the village. Maybe it's like a game centered on say the Mandalorian, where you have a hero and a couple of companions, but every week it's something different, even though they're still kind of exploring the same universe. They also talk about how to adjust for NPCs in a sandbox. In a narrative campaign, the tavern keeper is always going to be at the tavern, or the shopkeeper is always going to be at the shop. Whereas in a sandbox, one day you may be in one location, the next in a different, and so it makes it harder because the GM doesn't necessarily want to make a new NPC every time. So how to adjust for that? They also recommend coming up with deeper secrets, things that may not necessarily be easy to find, but things that you can start teasing out different ideas as you go along. They also talk about mapping your sandbox and how those locations are interconnected to reveal those deeper secrets. I'm going to show an image out of the book that I actually think really sets this off. So that they're giving a description of building this setting, which is the Alket system. Now, they specify ahead of time, okay, there are 9 planets there, and the player characters are going to be based on a starship. So they set it into what's known and accessible, so what the players can get to, what's known and inaccessible, so the players know about it, but they can't necessarily get there easily, and then unknown locations. So basically they're going through all of those steps of setting a few pieces and things to build on later. So they talk about 4 of the planets, but 5 of them are undefined. And so if you want a gas giant, well, you have 5 slots that you can throw a gas giant into. They talk about just different things that they put there, be it a ruined city, or I believe they talked in one of the examples about how one of the planets has 9 pyramids that represent the 9 different planets in the system. So just different little ways that you can start mapping it out without having to have the full map, or even in a traditional fantasy campaign, you don't have to know that the mountains are over here and the river is over there. Just start with something that the players can relate to, and fill in the rest of the map as you go along. I talked about in the last video the planetary exploration map, or record sheet, I guess I should say. And so I think that's a great thing that you can use to, in a similar fashion, to start putting that together. So another point they make when starting to talk about different adventures, when you're planning for the next session, the sandbox is a site, it's not a story. So whereas in a typical campaign, the story is what you're planning for, in this, you're planning for somewhere for them to go and letting them create the story as they go along. Now, it does require a lot of cooperation between players and game masters. If your players aren't going to be creative, they aren't going to try and come up with different ideas, it may not be the game for them. However, if you think your players are willing to try something new, maybe this is a different way to play that you haven't tried before, as opposed to using the next module or the next adventure path. They also fully encourage random encounter tables. If you're not planning everything, get a random encounter table, and that can take a lot of the load off of the game master when preparing the game. But also find ways to let players use their abilities. So, if the players are going to be involved in helping to create this new setting, let them be the stars. Find ways for, they put up an odd, character concept. Find a way to make that character shine, because you're not planning for, necessarily, a rigid organizational structure. Maybe something's a bit looser. They talk about, say it's an archaeological group, maybe you need the security guard, but you're also going to need the scientists. So let the players use those abilities and find ways to actually shine, as they're helping you create the setting. So they talk about different subgenres for this kind of game, and I think this is one of the best parts about this book. Is it shows how it can be used in many different ways beyond just the Starfinder setting. They talk about cyberpunk, hard science fiction, high science fantasy. So, cyberpunk, for Starfinder, a great analog would be something like Shadowrun. Hard science fiction, where you're going to remove those fantastical or magical elements, or a high science fantasy, say or hard science fiction, I guess you would say more like Star Trek. High science fantasy like Star Wars, a military game, parallel worlds, planetary survival, post-apocalyptic, space western like Firefly. Firefly is another great example of just a sandbox where you have a group, moving around. Maybe you're a group of traders, moving cargo from one place to another. Or you could even put in time travel. Time travel gives you options for a lot of variety, whether it's, not just the locations, or not just where you're going, but when you're going. So finally, they get into the toolboxes. Now, the text obviously on this is going to be really small. They go into a lot of different random charts, which I think is fantastic to help you flush out this system. So drift encounters in Starfinder, the drift is, because it is based on the fantasy setting of Pathfinder, the drift is actually another plane of existence that allows you to travel faster than light. But instead of a plane like the plane of fire, the plane of air that you access through magic, the drift is something that's accessed through technology. The NPC toolbox, names and species, quirks. The settlement toolbox, quirks, challenges, locations. The starship toolbox, names, quirks, legendary ships. Maybe they give you names and what this ship is for. Treasure toolbox. They break objects down based on their value. So if the players are supposed to receive 1,000 credits, well, maybe instead give them a relic blaster or something. But then they also give you variable value, something where, this is just a cool trinket, but it doesn't necessarily fit in, the credit value system. So overall, I have been absolutely loving this book. I thought I would just use it, for a couple of simple things, but I keep finding new ways to use the book. I picked up Starfinder a long time ago. I'll be honest, I have not played it yet. But this book has really pushed me to want to learn more about the Starfinder system, but also different ways that I can use these tools in other campaign settings. So overall, I highly recommend that you get this book. Again, for $10 in PDF, just the wealth of tips and information, I think, make it 100% worth it. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. I do appreciate you listening and tuning in for this. If you've got any questions or want to know more about the book, please put them down below. If I got something wrong, let me know. I'm happy to get those corrected. But other than that, thank you for watching. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, and we will talk to you next time. Thanks.